Okay, software, software, software. When are you going to stop the software? Because it's driving me crazy, right? It's all of these tabs, and it's all of these buttons, and it's all of these things that are going on. And like I said before, the software, most of the time, is harder to use than the actual instrument itself is. So we've led up to this point of talking about the different tabs on the home screen. We went through the data acquisition, the LC time program, the pump, the detector A, the controller, the autosampler, and the auto purge. Remember, that was under the advanced tab. If this is under the normal tab, it cuts some of the settings off from me, and I don't have as much control of it anymore. So I really like to do the advanced tab when it comes to this type of situation where I'm going in and creating a method so I can run some samples. Okay, so now I need to know how to run an actual sample, right? That's kind of what this is all built up to do. How do I run a sample on the machine? Okay, well, over here to the left, you're going to see a toolbar. And this toolbar says an arrow for top, instrument parameters, single start, batch processing, and data analysis. If I click the top arrow, I'll just click it just so you know what that is. It's going to revert me back to what we call the home screen of the workplace. So if I click the top, it's going to give me some new options here. System configuration, hooking up new pieces and parts to the instrument. A system check to make sure the instrument's working okay. Data acquisition, which is where I run a sample. Batch processing, which is where I run multiple samples. Report format, which allows me to change the things that are showing up on the report. And post-run analysis, which is basically a way for me to go into a different screen while this is running and allows me to manipulate data, make calibration curves, do some calculations, and so forth. So this is really the home screen. And if you do not see the single start that's over to the left, that's because it's embedded within the data acquisition tab. Data acquisition, again, means you want to run a sample. So if you don't see a single start button over here, it's okay. Just click data acquisition, and that brings up the buttons that fall under the data acquisition tab. Okay, I've got to talk about the difference between single start and batch processing. Most of the time when we run samples, we have quite a few of them to run. You know, these can be anywhere from 20 to 30 different samples that can be analyzed. So that's the purpose of batch processing. It allows me to load up all 30, maybe in my auto sampler tray, and allows me to tell the machine to go through and start injecting one sample after the next. That way I can walk off and leave it and come back after those 30 samples are finished. The single start tab, however, is for me to use when I don't really know how this sample is going to behave in the instrument. Common rule of thumb is always run a single start first. That way you can make sure this instrument is going to be doing what you want that instrument to do. After you run a sample in single start, you will have enough information then to go into the batch processing and allow it to run all of the samples in the batch, maybe 20 of them, maybe 30 of them, and feel really good about it because you've already ran one. You're not wasting your time anymore. One sample, it was ran, everything checked out, it was good. So then we go into the batch processing table and begin to run samples one after another, after another, after another. So I'm going to walk you through both of these setups, both of these icons to show you the difference of them because you probably will be using both of these sooner or later. So let's first talk about the single start here. So if I click the single start button, this screen is going to show up. And there's a few things that I want to change on this screen. Number one is the sample name up here at the very top. So what I've done is that I have made a sample of cholesterol. And I'm just doing cholesterol test run number 1. Now, I don't know how cholesterol is going to behave in the machine, right? This is something that I've not ran before, maybe. So in doing a single start, it's going to allow me to get an insight of how this cholesterol sample will behave in the instrument itself. Cholesterol is something that I have ordered from a chemical supplier. It has shipped to me. I have measured the cholesterol out of the jar. I've put it into a volumetric flask and made a solution out of it. I'm getting ready to run that solution. I want to know, can I pick cholesterol up? And if so, how long does it take for it to come off of this instrument? In minutes. Okay, so that's what I'm going to name it. Cholesterol test run. Alright, sample ID you can leave blank. You don't have to put anything here in this at all. The method file. Well, I've made a method file already. Okay, so the way that I find my method file, if I need to just make sure that I'm choosing the right one, I'll click the folder icon over here to the right hand side. And then the drop down box will have this folder called LCSolutions under the C drive. So I'm going to click LCSolutions. That's where all of my folders are going to be located. Now, we have a CTC 250 folder. We have some other folders that are embedded into here, but one of these folders is also a Chemtechathon folder. So depending on if you're watching this for one of our classes, or depending on if you're watching this for the competition, you need to choose the respective folder. So for this one, let's just choose Chemtechathon. So I'm going to double click this folder, and this shows me where all of the methods are located that I have made already. So we've already went through this process. That was the purpose of the other videos, right? You went through and you put a time, you put a UV vis absorbance, you told the pump what to pump and how fast to pump it, and we saved that as a method, and you knew what name you used. So for me, I named this thing cholesterol. So I will go in and I will double click the cholesterol method, and now it's loaded up into this method file blank. The next one down here below is called data file. Okay, so this is how the software will save my data. This is just like you opening up a Word document, writing a paper, and then saving it. Whatever you save it as, that's how the software is going to register that. So I'm going to click the folder here to the right once more. So for the data file. And again, I want to choose the proper location of where to save the data. So I'm going to click the drop down arrow. By default, it always wants to go to this project 1. I'm going to go into LCSolutions. I click my respective folder that I want to start running things in. And this is the folder that pops up now, right? Chemtechathon. And in the file name, I just want to give it something that I can register and that I can pick up on. So most of the time, I just really call this the same as I called my file name from up here at the above. So my sample name was called cholesterol test run number 1, and I'll do the same thing here too. I'll do cholesterol test run number 1, and then I'm going to hit open. And by doing that, it puts the file name here. Now, auto increment, if this was checked, then it would increment from run after run after run. So it goes from number 1, then number 2, then number 3 automatically. I want to make sure that that is not checked. I'm just doing a single run. There's no sense in me doing an auto increment here, right? I'm just doing one run. That's it, just to get some ideas of how this thing is going to run and operate, and we call it a day. So make sure that this auto increment is not checked. You'll be confused when you start processing your data. Background file name, data description, you don't really need anything here. These are okay to be left blank for what we do. And then down here at the very bottom, finally we see a sampler icon, and it says vial number, tray number, and injection volume. Okay, so the vial number. The vial number is the vial, of course, that you put your sample in that you want to run. So if you go back and take a look at the autosampler pictures, you will see two trays, one to the left and one to the right. Well, I've put the vial into the left-hand tray. That's tray number 1. So that's why 1 is listed here. In the first spot, I have put just a blank. That means probably something like DI water, deionized water. Nothing in it at all. It's just water, and we run it just to make sure that we get a nice flat baseline, which looks something like this. A flat line all the way across. That's always good news to me when I see it. So the sample that I have made, that I have loaded up onto the autosampler tray, is in spot number 2. So vial number, I'm going to tell it to start at number 2. This is my way of telling the machine what to inject and how the order of injection should take place. So I'm telling it, I want you to bypass all of the other vials, and I want you to go to position number 2, because that is where I put my autosampler vial that's loaded with cholesterol. And then the injection volume that's down here at the bottom. Right now it's set at 5 microliters. We can change that if we want. So the lab experiment will tell you how much to inject. And here I'm just going to up the ante a little bit. I'm going to put 10 microliters that's there. And that's all that I've got to do. It's ready to start. It's ready to inject a sample. I've just now told it where to inject or what to inject, and how to save the data once it comes off of this machine. Okay, so that's the single run tab. When I have finished making all of these settings, I'm going to hit OK. And then my machine is going to do a weird little sound, and you will hear the needle kind of move in the autosampler tray, and you'll see some activity that shows up here on the computer screen itself. So right now up here at the top it says LC pretreatment. This is it rinsing the needle. This is it purging everything out of the machine that needs to be purged, and it's getting ready to inject a sample. It's not done anything yet. It's just rinsing and it's just cleaning itself. That's all that's going on. When it has injected, you will see this pre-treatment icon go away. That means that it has now injected your sample. Your sample is running in the machine, and now we just saw that icon change. Not only that, but you saw a very clean chromatogram show up here again. It starts over with a clean slate. So a sample has been injected, it resets the computer screen, it starts back at 0, which means this is the initial time that we've injected a sample for you, and now a waiting game happens. So what should I see? Well, right now cholesterol is coming through the machine and it's going through the column, and sooner or later the cholesterol will leave out of the column, and when it does, my detector is going to show me your cholesterol has left the building. Okay, so what I will see here on the computer screen is something that shows that, right? And here it comes. So up, 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 up it goes. And then it's coming back down, slowly but surely it's coming back down. And hopefully what will happen is that it will go back down to what we call the baseline. Okay, so what does this peak mean? Well, when I injected my sample, as the sample began to go through the machine, the detector did not see anything in the beginning because it takes some time. It takes time for that component to come through the column and out the other end. So that's why we see a baseline of 0 in the beginning. And then finally cholesterol made its way out. And cholesterol, when it made its way out, begins to shoot up. Whoosh, up it goes. Because the detector is now seeing cholesterol. It doesn't know that it's cholesterol, though. It knows that there's something coming out of the column. The detector begins to see something coming out of the column, and up, 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 up it goes. The higher this line goes up, the more that it sees. And then eventually this cholesterol, or this component that the detector sees, well, it eventually is going to start coming out less and less and less. right? Because the majority of it's already gone. So there's some stragglers that are left behind in the machine, and that's why you see this peak come back down slowly but surely. Those are stragglers that are left behind. Okay, so this is what we call our chromatogram. That's all that there is to it. That peak means that that is a component that the detector has seen, and this allows me to feel really good about the samples that I'm getting ready to inject, because number one, it shows me that cholesterol has been picked up. Because if it did not see cholesterol, and I know that's the only thing that's in that sample vial, if it didn't see cholesterol, I wouldn't have seen a peak here. It would have been flatline. It wouldn't have seen it, right? It's like horse blinders. But there's a peak there, and that means it saw a component. I know there's only one component in it because I made it. So that lets me know that this cholesterol takes a little less than 1 minute to come off of this column. Okay, now I can change this, and I can make cholesterol come off a little bit later by changing some of the settings on the machine. I could also change it and make the cholesterol come off a little bit sooner if I change some of the settings on the machine. But that is what that peak represents. Now, this method will be running for 5 minutes because that's the time limit that I gave it, 5 minutes. So at the 5-minute block, which is going to be right here, the machine will stop the analysis, it will reset itself, and it will be ready for my next run or my next injection. So that is the purpose of a single run. That lets me know what I have done here makes sense for the machine. I see one peak. That peak comes up and it goes back off, and I don't see more than one peak that's there, and that's good news because I know there's only one component there. And it also gives me a time. How long does it take for this thing to really come off of here? And right now as we speak, it takes about 1 minute. So if I want to maybe fine-tooth my method, what I could do is that I could come back into the method screen and change this 5 minutes now maybe down to 3 minutes or maybe down to 2 minutes. And that lets me tell the instrument, I don't want you to waste time. I want you to process these samples, and I want you to cut off at 2 minutes or 3 minutes because I know now for my single run, nothing should be coming off of there. All right? Okay, so that's how we make the machine run a sample. If you want to stop the sample early, you can do that. You just hit the stop button over here to the left, and it says, are you sure you want to stop? And you can hit yes. And then when you do that, it's going to be a delay, but it now says LC ready up here at the top. And now the single start icon becomes active again, and I can go through and I can do the same thing all over one more time. So that is how we start running a sample on the HPLC. Do a single start first if you don't know anything about it. And that will give you some insight on how this machine is going to see and treat the compound that you are interested in measuring. So overall, this is called a chromatogram, and there is one peak on my chromatogram. So in the next video, we'll talk about batch processing. What's the difference? What are the steps that I need to do to make sure the batch processing works properly?